Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carlo Pietrobelli. I'm a professorial fellow at UNU-MERIT, calling from Maastricht, where I hold a UNESCO chair, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to the first first webinar that we're organizing within the activities of the chair. The seminar will continue with several meetings beginning in March and April and May with different speakers. And today we have the privilege of having two excellent speakers to start our conversations about science and technology policies for Latin America. Gabriela Dutrénit will speak about science, technology, innovation policies, development strategy, and policy inclusion, the challenge to design the policy mix. And she will be followed by Gonzalo Rivas that will share with us his comments. But let me say a few words to introduce the two speakers. Gabriela is currently a professor at the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana de Mexico, and she's been there for many years. And she's been coordinating, and she still coordinates, the postgraduate studies on economic management and policies of innovation at the same university. She's also a member of the scientific board of GlobalX, the Global Network for Economics of Learning, Innovation, and Competence Building Systems. And she's been in the board since 2004. And she's also a founder, and she was a coordinator of LALIX, which is the Latin American chapter of GlobalX. And the objective of LALIX is really to address issues related to the role of science, technology, and innovation policies to help solve social inclusion problems. For 2 years, she was also the president of Foro Consultivo Científico y Tecnológico in Mexico, the Scientific and Technological Advisory Forum. She's also a member of the UNU-MERIT board. She's been a consultant, a visiting fellow to many different universities in the world. So we're very happy to have her views and listen to her seminar today. Gonzalo Rivas is currently the head of the Competitiveness, Technology, Innovation Division at the Interamerican Development Bank. He's an economist from the University of Chile. He completed a master's degree at the Catholic University in Leuven. She was an executive vice president of Corfo, that, as you know, is the Chile's productive development agency. He was the president of the National Council of Innovation and Competitiveness in Chile, and he was also the president of the Latin American Association of Development Institutions. And together with all these institutional assignments, he continued his activity of research and publications on several issues related to productive development, industrial policy, innovation policies, and so on. So we really welcome you both to this conversation today. The plan of the webinar is the following. We're going to have Gabriela present her seminar, her paper, for about half an hour. She will be followed by Gonzalo for 15 minutes, and then I encourage you to ask questions. Please use the chat to ask your questions, and we'll be happy, and I'll be happy personally to pose these questions to the speakers so that we can have a final conversation for another 15-20 minutes. Gabriela, please, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Let me share my presentation. Wait a second. Yes. Okay. So thanks a lot for the invitation to participate, to give some reflection on the issue of science, technology, and innovation policy in Latin America. Actually, what we are going to share with you are some reflections, because we don't know exactly what the point of the agenda of the science, technology, and innovation policy, the issues of the objective of science, technology, and innovation policy, also the design and how to design a policy mix that deal with, that attend the problems that we have in the countries in general, in Latin America and the Caribbean area. So thanks, Carlos, thanks, UNESCO, and UNU-MERIT for the organization of this type of spaces that will be very interesting and useful for Latin American and the Caribbean for the future. So let me start. So I thought in an agenda trying to think in what we are reflecting. Actually, we had a meeting in Buenos Aires 2 weeks ago, and we were discussing some of the issues that we are I'm going to put on the table today. So the first point is where we are after the various crises, because of the health and the economic, etc. No, the analytical framework of science, technology, and innovation policy that are being discussing all over the world, and what is happening in Latin America in relation to these frameworks. So 2 topics for reflection, one related with the objective of science, technology, and innovation policy in Latin America, and the second related with the high structural heterogeneity that we have in all the Latin American countries. No? And based on that, trying to think in relation to what type of science, technology, and innovation policy we need in Latin America. So where we are after the various crises that we are experimenting. So we have a set of national problems. Today, they are related to the Sustainable Development Goals, but we have been discussing about the national problems in Latin America for decades. No? They are public issues because they are really problems, national problems that require public policies. No? And we have also a strong productive regional and institutional heterogeneity in all the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. No? And we have social inequality. We know, everybody knows that Latin America is the most unequal region in the world. No with the more percentage of poor people, but the inequality, no? And then, well, the affectation of biodiversity, because we have many countries that are with high biodiversity, and actually we are not taking into account the signs of the climate change in our countries and the affectation to the biodiversity of our countries. No? And then in this context, the COVID pandemic arrived, no? And then this was an important, a key emergency in the last 2 years, but we have another emergency that came before, the inequality, the poverty, no? And then, so we added to the emergency that we had the new one that was this related to the COVID pandemic. And then the social inequality emerged as even worse than before, because the poor people and the excluded people was much more affected than the people with more resources during the pandemic. No? And well, it was clear that the habitat claims, and it is necessary to put more attention to the environment. No? Wait a second. And then, but if we look at the pandemic from the science, technology, and innovation, we have the other, like the glass, the other that I said was the glass half empty, no? And we say that, well, but if we look at the pandemic from the STI, we can say we can look at the other part of the glass, no? The glass full, no? Full top. So yes, it is true there was a drop in STI investment, and in some way we can say there was a sort of destruction of science, technology, and innovation capability, or at least the capabilities couldn't continue this gradually growing that we had in the past, very gradual, no? But there was the other vision that there was a greater visibility of science, no, and it was a sort of change in the social imaginary, no, because the part of the solution to this crisis of the health crisis could be solved with science, no, with the vaccines and the treatment, etc. No, and there was some interesting experiences in terms of intersectoral and international coordination for the development of vaccines, in which some of the Latin American countries participated. No? So we can say that in some way the scientific policy advanced a little in this period, in the period of the pandemic, but in terms of the technology policy did not advance at the same pace, because the supply of vaccines on other other treatment, and also the instruments that were needed to attend the illness. No, there was a problem, a lack of supply, and there was a problem of demand. No, but on the other side, the business sector showed some resilience, flexibility, and also a response, a way to respond. Trying to, I could say that. I could see some innovativeness in the business sector, in the way they changed what they were producing, and they all start producing the mask and another product. The e-commerce exploded in Latin America, etc. So we can say, from the science, technology, and innovation side, we can say that there were some good and some bad signs. And some lessons from the economic and health crisis that we can take. First of all, that there was the incidence of affairs of the context on the development process, the economic, the social, the environmental context. It was clear how they had an influence on what was going on in our countries, no? And in addition to the first of the content related with science, technology, and innovation, because we usually look at the science, technology, and innovation as first, but also the economic, the social, the environmental, the health context was important in this process, no? And it is clear that we have to rethink our theories, the way we approach the innovation system, because we cannot dissociate innovation system and social and environmental sustainability. Okay, what are in this context, what are the analytical framework that are being discussed at international level in relation to science, technology, and innovation policy, and what we can say that what is going on in Latin America in terms of this framework? No? Well, the discussions and all this this new discussion that was introduced in the last decade, related to the transformative innovation policy, and this distinction between these three frames. The first frame related to the linear model, based on R&D, no? That was dominant in the 60s, from the 60s to the 80s. And then the rationality for the intervention was market failure correction, no? The focus in high-tech emphasis on creating radical novelties. And the second, the frame 2, related to innovation system and also entrepreneurship, that you can see it in general in the world from the 80s until today, with configure the rationalities instead of the market failure is the correction of structural failures of the innovation system, and the focal areas are radical and incremental product and process innovation, not just radical, because the point is the interaction in the system between the actors, and is much more related to an interactive model. And then this is third frame, transformative, the transformative change, which is emergent in all over the world, but this is the one that is in the discussion today in the journals and in the international organization, etc. No, with a multi-scalar geographical focus, not just national, and a lot of focus on niches. No, and then the rationality for the intervention is different, fixed failures, but of the transformation system, and the focus on socio-technical system. And in terms of the innovation model that is underlined, is systemic and experimental model. So the discussion today is how to move from the frame 2 to the frame 3. And then when you look at these frameworks, what has been going on in Latin America in relation to them, no? And then we have lagged behind the international trends, always in Latin America. So in the 70s and the 80s, the frame 1 was prevalent in the 70s and the 80s, and this focus on this linear model based on how to build R&D capacity, no? And then in the 90s and from the 90s, from the 2020s in other countries, we have seen the emergence of the frame 2 based on innovation system, and we can say that the frame 3 is emergent. We know that it exists, but I don't know how many of the Latin American countries, particularly those that take the decisions in terms of policies of STI, really know what they are talking when they talk about this frame 3, the transformative, based on the transformative innovation system, no? And so we can see in Latin America the coexistence of the frames 1 and 2. And then, but in this process, we have had a lot of experimentation, yes, in Latin America. We shall not copy and that's it. We have had experimentation, but in general, the instruments that were used in the different policy mix in the Latin American and Caribbean countries is much more like pilots, no? Because few resources have been assigned to these instruments, so they act as pilots. For that reason, they don't have a lot of impact. And well, some of these pilots have been interested in the sectoral funds in Brazil and Mexico, and also the seed capital in Chile, the Innovate program in Brazil, or the Impulsa in Colombia. Yes, there are some interesting experience adaptations, some a sort of new ideas of new instruments, but not a lot of money were put on in general on this instrument. In Brazil, a bit more usually, no? Okay, but let me give a little more details on the case of Mexico. Now we had the frame 2 specifically since the 70s, because it was at the moment that the CONACYT, the National Council of Science and Technology, was created in 1970, and then it was created based on the frame 1, the linear model trying to build the first capacities in science and technology. But it was in the 70s, but many of the features of the frame 1 still persist until today. No, the frame 2, based on the science on the innovation system, started by 1995, but it was reinforced with the science and technology law in 2002. And has continued until today. And we cannot say that we have a successful application of the frame 2 in the case of Mexico. No? And in relation to the frame 3, without saying that this is the frame 3, we have had some instruments that are close to this frame 3. For instance, in the previous administration during from 2012 to 2018, there were 3 small, very small, I say small instrument in terms of the resources that were assigned to this instrument, no? The scientific development project to address national problems, this is related to frame 3, the academic strengthening program for indigenous people related to frame 3. And in this administration, I would say that the main program that was introduced in this CONACYT from 2019 until now is the strategic national problem, still with few resources, but much more focuses on niches because they don't analyze the national problem. They try to fix on a problem of localities or very, very specific problem, no? And then, yes, we have some of the some ideas or some instruments related to frame 3, but the GERD as percentage of the GDP is nothing in Mexico. It is amazing, no? It was 0.44% of the GDP in 2014, which it is nothing. Yes, it's some money because Mexico is a large country with a large GDP, but it's nothing in relation to the GDP, the effort that is made in terms of science, technology, and innovation, and 0.3 in 2020, which means that it was reduced. And not just because of COVID, because it was reduced because the government don't assign money to this, no? So in terms of the systemic approach used in Mexico, but in general in Latin America and the Caribbean, the focus has been on innovation, productivity, competitiveness, and growth. Not much about national problems, no? In terms of the science, technology, and innovation policy. So what about our national problem? No, they are not taken seriously in the science, technology, and innovation policy, not clearly at least, no? And then, well, this framework was, this frame 2, as frame 1 was adopted and interpreted with the support of international organizations, and this includes the STI policy formulation and governance issue. So some aspects were interesting and were introduced, but this frame, the 2, the 1, and the 3, in general, were conceived for countries with different initial conditions and particularly trajectories of institutional construction, different from Latin America and the Caribbean. So we copy and try to adapt, but it doesn't work properly, no? See, yes, it is recognized that one size does not fit all, but at the end of the day, they are receipts that are introduced in our countries, no? So, and in all these spaces, we have this other problem that is the lack of connection between STI policies and development and the development strategy. First of all, because we don't, in general, in our countries, we don't have a long-term development strategy. This is a fair point, so it's difficult to connect the STI policy with a development strategy that is missing. And then, a second point is the limited vision in general of the political parties in terms of what is the role that science, technology, and innovation can have in terms of the contribution to the development process, no? And we have also a weak connection between STI policy and the development plan, because each administration has a development plan, even though it is not a long-term development strategy. In general, we don't find a strong connection between the STI policy that comes from abroad and the ideas come from abroad and the development plan of each administration. Obviously, there are some cases of connection, but they are very localized in time. I can say Brazil in the time of Lula, or Argentina in the time of Kirchner, probably in the second period. In the case of Chile with Bachelet, there are some cases See, yes, of much connection, but you cannot say that there is really an articulation of this. So, well, let me put on the table some topic for reflection. The first of them is the national problems and the creation of STI capacities. And so the national problem that we have, and any country all over the world have, they are complex problems. The solution demands a multidisciplinary approach. They require scientific and technological knowledge for the solution, and they also require innovation. We agree about that, no? This is an old concern in Latin America and the Caribbean. We were talking about national problem in the last 20, 30 years, no? And the Sustainable Development Goals have contributed to put them in the spotlight, no? But this is something that now it is more clear. Everybody discuss about the Sustainable Development Goal, and not everybody discussed it 20 years ago about the national problem, even though they were there, and in the academic area we had discussing about them, no? And the point is, how should the STI policy contribute to solving that? Not because the STI policy cannot solve the national problem, can contribute to the solution of the national problem. And I put this accent because we have a discussion now in Latin America, in many countries and many networks, because now the idea is we have to reorient the STI policy to the solution of the national problem. And so when we listen this and when we discuss this, the problem is, what are the objectives of the STI policy and what are the final development objectives? And we have to be the connection between both, but the STI policy cannot lose the role that it has in the general public policies, no? So the final development objective is, it can be specified in terms of a set of broad national economic and social objectives, but the main objective of the STI policy is the construction of capacity, the STI capacities, no? And then doing that, it can contribute to productivity, competitive and economic growth, social need, etc. No? But then we need more clarity in what are the objectives of science, technology, and innovation policy that are required. The first of all, we have a lack of consensus in terms of what is the objective of STI policy. And I think, and we were discussing this, I said in the LALIX group in Buenos Aires 2 weeks ago, it's like the STI policy needs a double objective. One is continue with the usual objective of STI policy, that is the STI capacity building. And a second objective is the contribution to the solution of national problems. So that was the first topic. That is a topic for reflection, definitely. A second topic for reflection is related to the impact that has the diagnosis of a high structural heterogeneity, no? And then it means that what we have with this structural heterogeneity is that we don't have one structure and one system. It's like we have several structures, several type of innovation system, or regional innovation system, or sectoral innovation system. No? So some authors have a look at from the classic of development and the structural theory of development of ECLA, no? for Latin America and the Caribbean. No? So for instance, Carlota, that she 1 month ago, more or less, she gave a speech with that, because our program in Mexico had 30 years, no? 30 years, wow. And then Carlota, she pointed something that she has been discussing in the last 20 years, actually, you know? The need to consider 2 goals and 2 institutional frameworks, no? The first is economic growth and global positioning, and then you need to build an institutional framework to support and strengthen a advancing trailed sectors in the economy. No? And then a second goal and institutional framework is related to the full employment and well-being for everybody, including the excluded people. No? And then you need to build an institutional framework for the promotion and direct support of territorial development in terms of the creation of wealth and quality of life for everybody, And then Jorge Katz, who also gave a speech in our anniversary, he stated, something that he said before. No, it was not the first time that he said that. No, he said that there are like 4 countries within a territorial unit. No, the first is the mother country that is close to the international state of the art. The second country is the old country, with low productivity and with lags behind the world. And then you have the country of natural resources with a strong ecological and environmental impact. And then we have the fourth country that is the excluded country, the marginalized from access to public services, the education, health, drinking water, etc. And then, well, I was reflecting on that. I'm more now than when I listened for the first time this idea that you have different structure and you need to think on that in terms of the design of STI policy. So I was reflecting about the case of Mexico. So how many Mexico we have, And then at least I identified at least 3 structures, that coexist. The modern Mexico, because Mexico is a manufacturing center connected to the global value chains in the agriculture sector, in the service, and not just in the manufacturing sector, in low, medium, and high-tech sector, which is articulated to the national and international scientific sector, in some cases to the Mexican universities and research centers, not many, and in other firms connected to the scientific sector all over the world, with high productivity, which operates in the national, but mostly in the international market. And you have a competitive workforce with industry, culture, and skills, industrial skills. You have the lag in Mexico, which is also in the same sector, but basically traditional knowledge and low-tech sectors with little articulation with the national scientific sector, with low productivity that operate basically in the local and national market, and also with a labor with culture and industrial skills. Yes, not the same that in a modern Mexico, but still some. And you have the excluded Mexico, traditional knowledge, no articulation at all with the local scientific sector that operates in local, very local market, and with workers with ancestral skills. So when you talk about Mexico, you have to and if you are starting to think in which science, technology, and innovation policy could be good to design in a case of Mexico, you have to think in 3 structures, And this is the follow point that I would like to point. At the international level, the discussion is between frame 2 and frame 3. Frame 3, I also mentioned the characteristic of these 2 frameworks, but this is a discussion at the international level. But when you look at the case of the regions, perhaps the discussion could be another topic, because we cannot have an homogeneous policy mix. We would have to think about STI policy for different structures that coexist, and each structure has different actors and different interaction. And the challenge is how to design STI policy for 3-4 structures in a heterogeneous countries. And we have to also to think of at least 2 major objectives of the STI policy: capacity building and contribution to the solution of national problems. Wait a second. So how to think in this in a STI policy, see, in frame 2, or that is moving from frame 2 to frame 3, or in another framework that we haven't think about it yet, no? But with a perspective of inclusion and sustainability, you have to think and due to the cycle of the public policy, we need to think in all the stages of the cycle, the setup, the design, the implementation, the evaluation, but having into mind this diagnosis of the Latin American and the Caribbean countries, no? At the time of set up the agenda, well, the problem is the diagnosis of the country and the structures and all the structure that each country, I identify 3 in Mexico, maybe in other countries it can be 4 or 5, I don't know, no? And then how to define the objective policy of the policy, taking into account both the capacity building and the contribution to the solution of the national problem, and obviously trying to articulate to what we have, just a development strategy at the administration level or in the future to the development strategy. So the policy means that we need, I think that is a policy means that articulate instruments that stimulate the different structure and that instrument that also attend to capacity building and contribution to the solution of this problem. No? So the policy mix must to combine a variety of instruments for the 2 great objectives of the policy and with a national and regional scope and not just niche strategies, and for the actor of each productive and social structure. And we cannot say that, because it's difficult to think, if you have limited resources, how much you have to assign to one structure or the other structure, no? But we have to take into account that even for the modern structure, in the case of Mexico, the modern Mexico, is the one that can generate resources so the other structure can converge toward the reduction of the heterogeneity. You need a type of balance taking into account the role of each of them. So let me move to one of the final point. We have this problem that the GERS, the gross expenditure in R&D as percentage of the GDP in all the Latin American countries is very reduced. In Brazil, that was our start. It was reduced a lot in the last administration. So we don't know what is going to happen in this new time with Lula, no? But if the pie does not grow, it is difficult to think in a policy mix that combine instruments for different structure, because if the pie doesn't grow, we are going to distribute the same scarcity between different structures, and we are not going to have much good result. So the final thought is, we live a triple challenge, I think. Finally, we have to finally overcome the health emergency, because we are still dealing with this, no? We need the economic recovery, and we have to learn from experiences, rethink the foundation of innovation system and STI policies, and achieve this connection between STI policies and development strategy. So some of the issues that, according to me, that deserve attention are how to articulate the STI policy to the development strategy, how to design and implement STI policies with an inclusion and sustainability perspective, which STI policy framework is more appropriate, or how do we rethink existing frameworks, how to articulate policies that ensure the contribution to the solution of national problems without losing the objective of creating STI capacities, and how to design a policy that encourage existing structures with the different actors and sectors of each structure. And that is, thanks a lot for the space to share my thought.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Like all excellent seminars, you concluded with big questions. So we really have to try to address these challenges. I'm sure that the audience will be happy to take up some of these topics, but first let us listen to Gonzalo and his thoughts on policy strategy and STI and inclusion and so on. Gonzalo, welcome.
Thank you, Carlo. Do you hear me well? Yep. Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Gabriela for sharing this wonderful presentation. And as always, she has put a lot of questions and a lot of meat in the plate, so it's very difficult to digest this very quickly. And there is some questions I would like to follow up with you, Gabriela, afterwards. But let me focus on some of the issues that Gabriela raised and try to elaborate some proposals. First, the question of the lesson of COVID. I think that Gabriela made a great point saying, yes, during COVID, science, particularly science, acquired a new value, before the eyes of the people. And that's something that's very interesting. But I would say that there are two additional things that Gabriela also mentioned, but more in passing, that I want to stress. The first one is that when you see the reaction of the scientific community, what you see is that there were capacities that were built in the countries that were mobilized towards a new objective. And that's very important, because I think that one of the issues that we haven't thought very carefully in science and technology policy in our countries is the question of capacity building. And Gabriela stressed that. And I think that is very important, because at the end, it's an asset that the country has. Mm-hmm. And in this time, that asset, show its true value. But it's also shown, the experience show us that you can induce those capacities to move toward different goals. And again, it's a question of incentive and how quickly the scientific community react to new incentives. Mm-hmm. And so, again, the question of how to mobilize these capacities that the countries have been building during the years towards new objectives, new goals, development goals, etc., is again then a question of the political economy of the incentive that we put in place. And it's incredibly to see again and again how quickly the scientific and research community reacts to that. It's incredible. And so there is this question of that the capacities that we build in terms of science and technology are able to move, in a very rapid manner if we, design policies that take into account that. And then, so there is the question of Gabriela saying, okay, we need to align our efforts toward development goals. And I agree with her. The question is that we don't have development strategies. But let's think about the question of national progress that Gabriela stressed. When I was the head of the National Innovation Council in Chile, we invited a number of president, ex-president, politicians, etc., to discuss the question of, okay, what we can do to, make this more attractive for you guys that, decide where to put the money. And the answer was obvious. Well, we have these problems in the country and you are looking elsewhere. So we need to align that. And so we thought, okay, what are the main problems that can be addressed in Chile at the moment? And we said, okay, natural disasters. Chile is, as earthquakes, as floods, and increasingly a number of human-induced so-called natural disasters. And actually, when we did the research between 1980 and 2001, Chile lost, on average, every year, 1.2% of GDP because of these natural disasters. And we just said, and was the #1 country in the world. But at the same time, Chile is the I would say, one of the two best prepared countries to face earthquake in the world, because we have invested a lot of in engineering, standard, norms, etc. And actually, we export architectural and engineering capacities to countries like New Zealand, China, etc., because of that record. So you can say, okay, this is a big problem for all the world. And it's a big problem for any politician in Chile, because, you know, losing your house, losing, the public space because of some disasters and flood is something that affects the people, you know, and if you invest in preventing that, or in having the capacity to answer very quickly to that, is something that may have value for the society, but it also has value for, you know, exporting. And it also addresses another question, which is the very old false dilemma of picking winners. Instead of focusing on a sector, you focus on a problem. And when you focus on a problem, that would be the software industry, the building industry, I don't know, many, even sociologists. We realized that we needed psychologists, sociologists to deal with the question of how to react after an emergency occurs, and so on and so forth. So you can address also the question of all the different disciplines in science, which is a very hard issue to deal with when you are in charge of science policy also. So, and when you see the case of the Netherlands, for example, dealing with the question of being under the level of the sea, and how they today, for many years, have been the leaders in exporting all what to do with, you know, hydraulic systems and machinery, etc. And now the second exporter of food in the world. So because they have managed, you know, to deal with the question of how to produce food without land. So it's incredible how such a small country is able to do that. But because they have to deal with this problem, and they have focused their energy on that. So in that sense, I fully agree that this is a way forward, but we need to build up the capacities and the instrument to do that. And there is a question of the lack of scale and continuity in the policies, which affect the science and technology system, because we change strategies and development goals, you know, after any change of government, no? And there is also, I think, a lot of false dilemmas that affect the discussion and are used as a way to say, while we don't solve this dilemma, we cannot proceed because we're still fighting. For example, the discussion between basic and applied research. So it's typically when you go to the finance minister, he will say, hey, okay, we would like to invest more in science and technology, etc., but we would like more innovation. You know, we don't want these people, you know, doing this work in laboratories and that has nothing to do with our challenges. The COVID showed that that was a false dilemma, that we need both. And the question is the size of the pie, as Gabriela said. But it's a very good excuse, because they will say to you, so that political economy problem, if you want, that incentive problem, and then came back. Or the question of investing in science or innovation, which is another kind of discussion that is also meaningless. It's ridiculous, but it's there. Or the question that, well, you know, the problem in Latin America is that the private sector invests too little in research and development. Yes, too little in a very little pie. And again, when we were at the National Innovation Council, we conducted a research to see what was going on in the countries of the OECD when the countries had the same level of income per capita that Chile has today. And we look after that, and a pattern emerged. And the pattern was all the countries that were natural resource intensive countries, New Zealand, Netherlands, Norway, Australia, etc., Canada, were investing more than Chile, yes, but was the public sector was the main contributor. And the question is why? And the answer is the following. when you want to develop a new kind of strawberry that is resistant to, drought, using less water, let's say, it takes 10 years of research and development. When you do the same with grape, when you do the same in forestry, when you do the same in cattle, etc., it's always the same. It's always the same. So explain me what kind of firm in Latin America, in the agriculture area, in the fruit area, in the forest, can conduct that kind of research by their own means. And we all know also that those results are, plenty of externalities there and leakages, etc. It's very difficult to reap the benefit. So that's why the public sector in countries that have very, natural resource intensity need to step in first. And it has to do it with the private sector afterward and have to induce it. But then I agree that this is a very difficult issue and we need to put more meat in the pie. And so I would say that we can go through two steps at this moment that can be, something that to advance. Regarding the question of the challenges and national goals, one way to go one step toward that is to implement the question of innovative public procurement. So there you have a state that it's responsible for like 20% of the expenditure in the GDP, and we are not using it, to foster innovation, science, and technology. And I am not talking just about innovation. I am also talking about research, because you can, through innovative public procurement, you can set goals that are not going to be met, by the standard that exists today in terms of innovative capacity of the private sector. But you can mobilize those resources and to set, challenges to, improve the quality of our housing, for poor people, improve the quality, the use of renewable energies, anything, health, etc. And the COVID experience show us that the public sector can do that. So that's one way of doing things. And I think that we already have some experience in Latin America that are being developed. And by the way, Brazil, again, is one of the leaders. And that's what I would say is one of the ways that to move forward. And the second that I will propose is for, private sector development, as research and development, but for collective goals. And that will, what I refer to the Romer tax. So basically the idea of Paul Romer was to say, okay, if I have, a common challenge for the sector, let's say, for example, I am a fruit grower and I know that there is some plagues that are going to affect my products, the best solution is to invest in research and development. But then there is the common problems and the free riders. So the solution is I will put a tax on the whole sector, but then I will give back the money to those guys, provided that they invest that money in research and development. We have experience in Latin America in that. It's the rice growers in Corrientes Provincia in Argentina, in Colombia, the cafe, etc. In Norway, the salmon. And what is interesting is that, for example, in Chile today, the fruit growers are saying, we need that. Please, to the public sector, they say to the public sector, and Corfo and the Ministry of Economy are studying this. We started to study it some years ago, but now it's reserve facing. The idea of imposing a tax and then give back the money to those guys because they need to conduct that. And that's a way also to avoid putting money, public money, in things that are important, but that they can be handled by the private sector. It's closer to the. And finally, I just wanted to stress a point that is an idea that also Gabriela mentioned, and which is the question of not imposing, like models on our countries. And I think that we also need to study more the question of how to approach this from an evolutionary perspective. And in that sense, I would say that one of the answers, absence in the discussion in Latin American science, technology, innovation policy is the question of the universities. I mean, most of the research is done by universities. Most of the money goes to universities. And they are absent in terms of policy from our discussion. And if you want to move a lever, you know that the researchers are there. And we approach the question from the idea of research, but the internal, political economy of universities is also crucial. And we need to bring in the discussion about university also in this debate, because most of the money goes there. When you discuss in Argentina, for example, the role of the Ministry of Science and Technology versus CONICET, most of the money is in CONICET. And we need to build from there, perhaps. And in most of the countries that are still in the middle stage, I think that would be crucial. Well, that will be all. And thanks again, Gabriela, for this wonderful presentation, and Carlos for the opportunity to comment. You're in mute, Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gonzalo. Really, a lot of useful insights and questions and reasons to really think deeply about all these issues. I think we have a couple of questions from the chat, and I invite anybody willing to ask questions to our speakers to put their questions in the chat in YouTube. There's the first question by Amar Numanovic, and that is asking Gabriela about the concept of a national problem, what a national problem is. Does it refer to social welfare issues or priority economic objectives defined by governments? And in case of the latter, in case of being these economic priorities defined by governments, does it require a more mission-oriented approach that is currently lacking, or something else, some different approach? Perhaps we can start with this question, and I see the questions are coming.
Yes, well, actually, the national problem can be both welfare, problem related with welfare, but also problem related to priority economic objective, because in the country there is a problem of productivity, competitiveness, lack of growth, etc. It's a national problem, because you need to solve that in order to move in the process of the development process. So usually we associate the national problem much more with a public problem of the population. Yes, much more, but also the other economic problem. And actually, in my presentation, I didn't have time, but I had one page related with the mission-oriented project, because yes, you can approach this national problem or these public problems of this economic national problem. You can approach from the point of view of the mission-oriented project, and you need, from that point of view, you need this a policy oriented by missions in that direction. For instance, in the case of Mexico, in a project that we developed for the IDB with Mariana Mazzucato, we analyzed some large projects in 4 Latin American countries that were we try to look at this project as mission-oriented project. In the case of Mexico, we identify the diabetes as a public problem in Mexico, because 15% of the population has the prevalence of this illness. And then there was a strategy try to deal with this public problem and national problem in Mexico in the previous administration, and we try to analyze that as a sort of a policy oriented by mission, and in that case, but that the mission was try to reduce the rate of growth of this illness. And this analysis is in the IDB working papers or something like that, which is the era of the missions-oriented projects in Latin America.
Thank you. We also have a question by Lucia Pitaluga. She's wondering about the detection of niches in specific paths to sustainability as powerful inputs for science, technology, and innovation policies. Because she suggests innovation niches help to discover hidden capacities that maybe in an only productive structure approach are not visible. This idea of innovation niches help direct and focus attention and reveal something that is hidden before. Do you want to comment on that? Or we can group this.
No, you can say something. I was waiting for Gonzalo just in case he wanted to say something. But yeah, well, I am not saying that I don't lack at all the frame 3 and this idea of niches, because in the case, particularly in the case of sustainability, I think that the niches it is a focus much more important than to have just a national policy general for all over the country. Definitely the niches are very important for that, because in specific areas you can identify problems and how to deal with this affectation to the biodiversity or to the sustainability in the country. Definitely, I agree. I'm saying that in general, as the STI policy in general in the country, I think that it is not enough to have this approach of niches, and we still need a much more national problem to deal with the type of problem that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah. I don't know, Gonzalo, if you want to add something
for the question.
No, I'm okay with what Gabriela said, and I think that there's another question that is it's addresses to both of us from Andrew Roberts. So if you want, I can comment on that.
Yeah,
it's a question of how to.
I don't know whether everybody sees this question. Perhaps you can repeat it and then try to answer.
Okay. So Andrew says, my question to both speakers is, how could the science, technology, innovation system actor could do a better job in identifying, prioritizing, and supporting capability building in niches where transformative change is happening, which is related to something that Lucia was also mentioning. And I would say that this is a very, very difficult question. And let me explain why. When we were trying to promote the question of green mining in Chile, okay? So there was money, the finance minister said, okay, we are going to prioritize green mining. So we went to CONICET at the moment and said, okay, we need to address the question of what kind of people we are going to, and disciplines we are going to prioritize for paying them to go to do PhD and post-PhD and research, etc. And so the question is, okay, is a mathematician excluded? No. Mining is plenty of things that mathematicians do, modeling, etc., etc. So it's not just engineers, geologists, the biologists, obviously, you can do that and can do things also in mining. There is a lot of work on bacteria, etc., that help, the question of how to lixiviate materials in mining. And sociology is very important, because now, having a mine is basically a question of how do you relate the mine operation and construction with the community. And so it's very difficult from the question of this saying, okay, how do you really prioritize? It's not disciplines anymore. It's the question is, and then is research, the actual research that someone that's a physicist, a chemist, or biologist is going to do. So again, and that's why I was referring to the question of universities. Most of those people that go outside to get a PhD will go back to universities. So the policies needs to be orientated toward what kind of centers for research you do and help to establish in universities, for example, among universities, and how you put incentive to that. And then you will find the problem that universities, and UNAM must be an example, need to grow in organic way. Why? Because if you come from the Faculty of Medicine and you are the rector, the principal of the university, and you were elected with those votes, if you put more money there, all the people in the rest of the university will say, stop. What you are doing is trying to perpetuate yourself because you are putting money where the votes come from you. So you want to increase the researchers there, even if it's a center of excellence. So universities have this very difficult way of dealing with this thing, and the public sector need to intervene with very carefully, because the day that the UBA students go to Buenos Aires to the street, they can't just stop. So it's very tricky. And I said that's one of the main issues that we have today in science and technology policy in Latin America, and we are not dealing with that.
Thank you, Gonzalo. We have another question on universities. That is a comment by Hugo Cantis, suggesting that universities are essential places for the creation of science-based enterprises as well. I may add a question myself on incentives that researchers face. I've acted dean of economics in my university, and in order to make a career, we all have to publish. This third mission of the university, working with society and working with the enterprise world, is of a lesser importance if you want to make a career. How do we correct these incentives and make research compatible, and the research efforts of researchers compatible with the development objectives and this transformational change that Gabriela is reminding us of?
Yes, and again, the problem of the incentive. Yes, we were, for instance, because we did the presentation of the book on mobilizing knowledge in the diabetes research, and then 70% of the result of the project were down in articles published in scientific journals. And then when they are dealing with a problem that need specific solutions and technical solutions and social solutions. But the problems are the incentives that we have, as Carlos said. So yes, the universities should promote, yes, the orientation of the student and the future BA, etc., toward the creation of firms. This could be powerful, but who can make that in the university? It's not so easy, because the researchers are not much interested because of the incentives. So the administrative staff had to organize the promotion of that. So we still need to rethink many things, to define priorities, because this is also related with Andrew. The problem of the priorities is we don't define clearly priorities. We cannot move in the right direction, whatever is the right direction is, because we don't know exactly what the right direction is. But the right direction is that contribute to the development process. based or not based in the frame 1, 2, or 3, or based, it doesn't matter. The point is how to move in the direction of the development process. Yes? And in terms of the strategies, again, perhaps we need a combination of frame 1 and 2 for the national policy, and much more closer to the frame 3 at the level of the regional and local STI policies. But we need to combine this in a structural way, no?
Yeah. No,
And Carlos, finally, the point of the data, we don't have the data. It is amazing. Yesterday, I was trying to check the last data for the GDP, for instance, the GDP, not the GDP, sino the GERD, no, in relation to the GDP, and the last date was 2020 in the receipt. I was checking the receipt database, which is connected to the UNESCO database, and 2020, and not for all the indicators. So we have a lot of problems. IDB has made a lot of effort in the direction of organizing the data, but the problem is how the data is collected in the country.
Yeah. Very true. I don't know if I think we have to conclude quickly. I don't know if you want to have a final comment or a final message to all of us and the audience. I personally learned a lot from this conversation. I learned the variety of different topics and the need to make them compatible and take this multidisciplinary, multi-layer approach that we always need to remember. I wonder whether you want to, say a final sentence to the audience to conclude.
Well, I can start and then Gonzalo can close, no? Then I think that the point of the different countries within a country, the different structure within a country, I think that we have to take attention to that. We have moved to put much more attention to the modern part of our countries, and in the last decade we have put more attention to the marginalized part of structure of the country. But we need to think, and we have a good diagnosis, and we think a STI policy that put attention to all the structure and design the right incentive for all the structures. Yeah, this is a first point. The second is because we have all the discussion today in the direction of the excluded people. Yes, but the STI policy cannot be only oriented to solve the problem of the excluded people. We have to have the perspective of the excluded people, definitely, as we have to take the perspective of the sustainability. Yes, but we have to keep this objective of building capacity. Otherwise, in 10 years in the future, we are not going to have the right capacity for dealing with any type of problem. So we need to keep the objective of building STI capacities. And finally, I criticize the framework 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc. that come from Europe and US, etc. But we have the responsibility of thinking in our conditions, no, our reality. So we are responsible of thinking and proposing a different framework. We are not doing that.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo.
Yeah, just a few words. But the question of that Gabriela just raised, the Jorge Katz approach again, the different countries, etc. That's something that I would like to discuss further, and let me explain why. Because I think that one of those parts of the countries, etc., is not only a subject but an actor. For example, those that are related with the new economy and etc. And perhaps the public policy for those actors and sector is different than when you are dealing, for example, with those that were mentioned, like the excluded, because the question with the excluded is that they are seen only as a subject and not necessarily as an actor. And the question is, can really they be an actor, or is a different treatment? So with dual country, we have discussed many times about the question of, okay, when you are helping, let's say, through public policy, these startups that end up in Silicon Valley, and most of the jobs go there, etc., now are coming back. But anyway, well, what is the object really of the policy? What do we want to do? And it's different for natural resources, etc. No, so that this idea of having different approach for different parts of the country, we need to discuss further that, because I think that's a very interesting issue.
Thank you very much. I think we had a great discussion and a great start of this seminar series. We're going to have more in the spring, so we'll be happy to invite you and take part in future occasions to discuss issues that are relevant for science, technology, and innovation policies for sustainable development in Latin America. Let me say goodbye. Thank you all. Thank you, Gabriela and Gonzalo, for this great start. And stay tuned. We'll soon again meet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all for coming. We should wait a few seconds until YouTube synchronizes, and then we can finalize the stream.
No sé si conectarme al Zoom, ¿no? ¿Me podré o no? O...
No, I don't stream.
Por si Carlos quiere.
Your stream was
Chao, chao, Pepín.